Hi, my name is Sonya Slater, and I'm a psychologist at True North Counseling. I'm also the practice owner here. I was really excited when Adam and Allie contacted me about being a contributor for this month's module on self-care, because self-care is something that is really important to me, something that I'm passionate about, and something that's integral to my everyday life, not only in the work that I do with clients and teaching them how to practice good self-care and the tools that they need, but also in my own life. Being a psychologist, we tend to be, or a therapist in general, we tend to be pretty sensitive people. In order to be able to pick up on the feelings and the emotions and connect with people in therapy the way we do, by nature, that's how we are. So it is easy for us then to take all those stories home with us, and they're usually the worst part of people's lives. That's why they come to us. Nobody ever goes to therapy to say, my life's amazing, everything's perfect, I have great relationships, and I'm so balanced. That's not a thing. If you do, please come to me. I'm more than happy to see you. But outside of that, we do hear a lot of stuff, and self-care is the major way that we keep from taking it home with us. That makes us more resilient. It helps us stay in this field longer and avoid burnout. So I am thrilled to be talking to you about some of the things that we've found helpful. So the area that I'm going to be focused on is relationship self-care. And under the umbrella of relationship self-care, there are so many places where we can take this. But I think after thinking about it a little bit, what we've decided to do is focus on relationship with self, because really that is the foundational piece of any type of self-care and relationship care. The relationship with self is the foundation of all other relationships. So if you're not good with yourself, it's going to be really hard for you to have good connection and attachment with other people. So it's pretty key there. So I think that's a good place for us to spend some time today. I would say one of the number one complaints that I get is people feeling lonely and a sense of isolation. Sometimes that's about a change that's happened and they just haven't established a new social network, like a divorce or birth of a child, graduation, moving to a new city. All those things can contribute to that. That's a pretty simple fix. A lot of times what I see more of, though, as we start going through kind of what's underneath this loneliness, is really leading to a disconnection with self and a meaningful relationship with self. We've all experienced it. You walk into a party, you know lots of people, but yet you just feel separate. You feel disconnected. You don't feel like part of the fun. It's like you're watching everybody else have fun. That is fundamentally a disconnection with self. That's one of the keys, or the clues that you know that you need to spend more time alone. And that's the other part of this. In order to connect with yourself, this is like the warning that goes ahead of time. In order to connect with yourself, no matter what practice it is, fundamentally what you're doing is you're spending time alone, not doing anything else to distract you. And with that being said, you sometimes, when you haven't done this in a while, you can experience some anxiety, discomfort, sadness that seem to come out of nowhere. And that could be really disruptive and unsettling for people. If this happens, that's okay. Know that that's normal. Those feelings were probably there, but you're so distracted thinking about, what do I need to do? What just happened? What does this person need from me? How can I coordinate this? That your brain is busy solving those problems rather than attending to how you're feeling. So it's not like, wow, I slowed down and all of a sudden I got anxious. It's probably that anxiety's been there and your body and your mind are showing you, this is what you need to handle now. So that's normal and that's okay. If it becomes overwhelming, say to yourself, I'm gonna stick with this for 10 more seconds. And then I am going to go ahead and leave this and move on to the next thing so that I feel, good. This shouldn't be an exercise in torture. That's never the plan. It should feel good, although at first it may feel uncomfortable. After some time of doing this on a regular basis, you are probably gonna look forward to the time of solitude and being alone, because it's easy to get into a place where you feel excited about those moments, and you can start seeing the benefits of it. So when I was in grad school, and this is how I know this, because when I was in grad school, my husband was in medical school, and he lived in Dayton, or we lived in Dayton, not just him, we both lived in Dayton, and I went to grad school at Xavier in Cincinnati, go Muskies. So I had a 1-hour drive in both directions pretty much every day of the week. During that time, I would dread it. I'd be like, oh my God, I can't do anything. I can't get anything done. I can't read. I can't study. I can't write. What am I supposed to be doing? And so you're trapped. You just sit there. I would turn the radio off and I would just drive. And I learned that I really enjoyed that time because I could just let my mind go and I could see where it took me. I could feel the things I needed to feel. I could be creative and have great imagination. And what I started to learn over the course of those, 5 years we lived there, that I really had a lot of fun doing that. I enjoy my mind. I'm hilarious in my own mind. Other people may not think so, but in my head, it's delightful. I love the way that I see things and the funny little thoughts that pop into my head. And I'm happy that I can have appreciation and gratitude for that, because really that's kind of where we're trying to get. That is not just self-awareness or self-mindfulness, but that's really a part of self-appreciation. And so that's a great thing. What a wonderful gift I was given out of something that I thought was going to be a heavy burden and a sacrifice for my relationship, right? Oh, the martyr. So yeah, it can really lead to some really great outcomes if you stick with this on a regular basis. So one of the things that I did, and one of the things that I regularly teach clients, is something called 7-11 breathing. This is a technique that we teach to first responders to help them kind of clear their minds. I would suggest doing this, if you can, 3 times a day would be great, but starting out, if it's once a day, fabulous. That's awesome. So what this does, how this works and how it's helpful, is that the way your brain works is that there are times when one part of your brain turns off when another part turns on. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to turn down or turn off the part of your brain that's called the amygdala. That's where your fight or flight responses come from. Now, sitting in your office, you may not have a strong sensation of fear or needing to run, but any level of stress is there, and your amygdala plays some level of role in that. If you're driving in traffic, being aware of the other cars in the traffic, you're vigilant. That's your amygdala. So there's some level of activation there. There's some level of it turning on. But when that amygdala turns on, your cortex turns off. And as you all know, your cortex is responsible for abstract thought, problem solving, language, amongst a number of other things, executive functioning. So in order to do this kind of work, you really need to have capacity at that cortex level. So one of the ways to automatically, neurologically, this isn't a mind trick or anything like that, this is a physiological change in your brain when you do this, which is, I think, pretty friggin' cool the way that happens. So how you do it, super simple. You can do it anywhere. People don't have to know you're doing it. You sit somewhere, or you can be standing, doesn't matter, just in a comfortable position. There's not a lot of thought that goes into it, and it's just counting. Everyone can count to 7, everyone can count to 11. So, but what I want for you to do right now is to go ahead and close your eyes. Unless you're driving, then don't close your eyes, because that's very dangerous. Don't do that. Just do this later. It's easy to remember. It's not a hard thing at all. So for everyone else, close your eyes. And what we're going to do is we're going to take 3 breaths. What you do is you breathe in to the count of 7 and breathe out to the count of 11. Just focusing on the breath. That's all. That's where your attention goes. It's just the counting and the breath. So okay, let's try this. Breathe in to 7. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and exhale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Inhale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Exhale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Inhale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And exhale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So there's not a ton to that. The real key is that the inhale is shorter than the exhale. That's what activates your parasympathetic system. That's what calms your body down neurologically and shifts the blood flow to the brain. I don't know if you feel any different. You should. Things should feel maybe more slowed down, maybe a little more focused for you. So this is a really good practice. The way that I try to incorporate this into, or any practice, I don't care if it's meal planning or flossing your teeth before bed, whatever it is, the best way to add something new into your practice, because I know a lot's getting thrown at you with this module, because there's a ton of great ideas, I'm sure, and I can't wait to listen to it myself, but the best way to add something in that you're not used to doing or isn't part of the routine is to pair it with a behavior that you're currently doing. So I think of what are the things that I do every morning. If I want to remember to take my vitamin, I put it next to my toothbrush, because I know I'm not walking out the door without brushing my teeth, because nobody wants that. So when I see it there, it reminds me to take your vitamin. If this is a piece of it, what I did actually in grad school was to do it every time I buckled my seatbelt. I knew I'd be getting in the car every day. I knew I'd be driving at least twice a day. And so that was a moment where I could take just 15 seconds, 30 seconds that we just took to do that, and to kind of take those breaths, calm my body, calm my brain, and to ask myself, how are you feeling? What's gone well? How are things going? What do you need? What do you need to let go of? Is there a problem that needs to be solved? When do you want to think about that problem? Is now the time? Is later the time? So it gave me space in order to reevaluate partway through my day of what intentions I had. Am I meeting those intentions? And what do I intend for the next segment of time? So there's that. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is self-awareness. Self-awareness and self-compassion both come together to create self-acceptance, which is the ultimate goal of where we want to be. But before you can have self-acceptance, you kind of need to have some self-awareness, some understanding of who we are. So it's not just noticing ourselves or noticing I'm tired, I'm sad, I'm hot, but it's how we go about noticing ourselves. It's our monitoring our inner experiences. So Freud came up with this, I know, Freud, you're right, okay, bear with me. Freud had this idea of the ego, the superego, and the id, right? You're probably all familiar with that. But there was this part of the ego that he even broke down even further. So the ego is that space between your superego, which is your rigid right versus wrong morality, kind of, you should be doing this, and your id are your basic impulses, the drives to live, food, sex, all of that. Your ego is the thing that moderates you in between. But there's a piece of the ego that we have that he theorized was there called the observing ego. And it's like splitting apart a part of your awareness in a non-judgmental way that observes the inner processes, your thoughts, your feelings, how you go about thinking about the world, so that metacognition, so thinking about how you think, kind of blows your mind, like looking into multiple mirrors and seeing that reflection to infinity. But it's really a essential part of the process, and what you're doing with self-awareness is trying to develop that muscle. Because what we need to do is we need to learn more about who we are. To me, that's the whole point of why we're here, is to know ourselves and know ourselves in the context of relationships and our experiences with the world. That's just my bias. I'm a psychologist, so it kind of makes sense. I think that anyway. And one of the models that I use for this is called Johari's Windows. If you have worked in corporate worlds, you may have heard this before. But basically what it is these two guys came together and created this model about knowing self and others knowing you. So it's like a quadrant. So there's like 4 squares, right? And along the top is self, and along the side is others, right? So this first part along the top is self what is known to yourself. And the other side is what is unknown to yourself. This side is others, what is known to others about you, and what is unknown to others about you. So if you think about it, this kind of makes sense. There is stuff that we know about ourselves. We're funny, we're smart, whatever, we're empathic. That's known to self. I know that about me. But then there's stuff that's known to others. Other people may think I'm funny, so we'll just say, for the sake of argument, other people think I'm funny. And then there's stuff that is so known to self and known to others. That is our open self. That's the self that we share with the world, that's shared knowledge between others and myself. Then there's a part of ourself that's known to self, but not known to others. And that might be, depending on the situation, that might be our private self or our hidden self, depending on how much of it is just, it's private stuff. You don't, TMI, you don't go sharing everything with everyone. It's dependent upon the relationship and the world and the situation and the dynamic we're in. But then there's also parts of ourselves that we don't share out of shame. That's not a good thing, that's a bad thing. Shame is almost universally bad. Guilt can be a good thing because it gets you to do the right thing, but shame and hiding things away from others is usually something that leads to problems in the long run. But so it varies depending on how much of that should be shared with others and how much shouldn't be. Then you have unknown to self, but other people see it. Yeah, right? These would be like implicit biases, unconscious beliefs that other people are like, whoa, you got an issue there, but you don't see it yourself. And we all have those. Then, did I mention that that's called the blind spot? That's our blind spots, or some people call them our growth edges. Then you have unknown to self and unknown to others. And this is just simply your unknown self. And when I think of something called a subconscious, like what, Freud talked about as the subconscious mind, I think of that part of yourself that is unknown to self and unknown to others, that section. You still respond, your decisions, your reactions to the world, this still impacts those decisions and reactions. It's just you can't quite put your finger on it, but something feels wrong about it. It's still impacting you. So the idea is to make that quadrant of open self, what you know about yourself and what others know about you, so sharing of yourself with others, to make that the largest. And so part of that is through self-awareness. So when I think about self-awareness, I think about making that quadrant a little bit bigger, so that we are more fully aware of who we are and the decisions we make. It makes us less reactive to other people, and it makes us more intentionally respond during situations, because wouldn't you rather have a choice of how you want to respond than just knee-jerk reactions? Because usually that's not a good thing, although sometimes it can work out for you. So how do we change this? How do we make this section of known to self and known to others bigger? Well, there's a couple of ways to go about it. One is kind of unstructured, and one is a little more structured, so I try to give you a little bit of both. The unstructured one is just a self-reflection practice, thinking about who you are and all that. So what I'd like for you to do, if you're sitting down and you have paper, I want you to use pen or pencil and paper. I want you to write this out by hand, because typing it on the computer or typing it on your phone is not the same thing as writing it by hand. When you write something by hand that is emotional or related to yourself, your brain integrates it better at a deeper level, and it's much more accessible to you as far as knowledge and changing behavior and understanding yourself. So write down with pen and paper all the things you are. So on the left hand, or I guess this would be your left, right? Left-hand side of the paper, I want you to list the things that you are. Act like you are going into a room where you don't know anyone and they say, who are you? And you have to write something down. So go ahead and pause this and write it down. Okay, so you should have done that. So if you're like most people, when I ask them to do this, this is something like what they write. My name is Sonya. I am a psychologist, I am a business owner, I am a wife, I am a mother, I am a daughter, and there's all these things we list out. But I would say that those actually aren't who you are. Those are roles you play in the world. So we want to go to a deeper level than that. We want to know who you really are. Because what happens if your job goes away or your spouse goes away? then it can if we make our identity the roles we play, it can create an identity crisis when those roles no longer appear or are there, or you're not able to express yourself in that role anymore. So it's important to understand not only what roles we play, but who we are in the context of those roles. So draw a line down the center of the paper from top to bottom. Now, on the other half of the paper, I want you to list what characteristics are expressed in those roles. So what about those roles fulfills you? What characteristics that you have that make you successful at those roles? Go ahead and do that now. Go ahead and pause this, do that now. Okay, so some of you may have paused it, some of you may not have, but if you haven't, you can go back and do this later. What I would contend is this list of adjectives that you've created, or I guess it could be adverbs too, technically, but whatever. Regardless of phrase, what type of word it is, it doesn't really matter. These are a more accurate representation of who you are. And the way that you express who you are through those roles. I am empathic, I am kind, I'm caring, I'm inquisitive. Those are all things that I express both as a psychologist for sure, but also as a parent and a spouse. But they just get expressed in different ways. But those are all part of who I am as a person that make me up, that make me unique, that create this underlying sense of satisfaction. I would not be happy as an accountant. I wouldn't. It would meet far fewer needs, emotional needs for me because of that. Okay, so the second way to kind of gain some more self-awareness would be looking at your values. What do you value? Because that is something that we develop early on and we carry through us through our development, are the values we have. And they're in part given to us by society, by our family, but also by our experiences and our friends, the schools we go to. All of that impacts us and creates different values, that systems that we have. So, our life is happiest and we feel most happy and complete when our value system aligns with our behavior and what we're doing in the world. So one way that I like to do this with folks is to have them do what's called a values card sort, and that should be posted somewhere that you can download. So basically what this is it is 100 cards that have different values on them. Family, like connection, I forget what they all are because there's 100 of them, there's a lot. You basically cut them out and you have to sort them. First you put them into piles of like, this is important to me, this is not important to me. And then once you have the ones that are important to you, you have to put them in order of importance. That's why I like this. Because if you think about values, you could think of, well, I should like this. Family should always be first, right? Not always. Different phases of our life, family isn't first, and that's okay. Work may not be first. It just depends on your situation and who you are and your experiences and what you're doing in that phase of your life. So you go through and you sort these out in terms of relative importance. Now, the part that I like is you look at your top 5, and then you open your calendar, and you say, how are my top 5 expressed in this calendar? Our calendar shows the way we live. We dedicate the most amount of time usually to the things that are most important to us. Are you doing that? If not, what needs to change? What's more important? Is it that you listed your values in an idealistic way of what you want them to be in the future? Or what they were in the past and it doesn't really fit? Do we need to move that top value down and move something else up? Do you need to change your calendar so that it better fits your value system? Because that will lead you to be a happier person overall. So those are just 2 simple practices that kind of help build some insight around how you're living your life today and who you are as a person and kind of creating some direction in your life. The other way to build self-awareness is through journaling. There's journaling prompts out there, bing bang, everywhere that you can get that will help you kind of explore, what you feel, what you think, you make of certain situations or experiences in your past. And revisiting those can help give you some more insight into who you are and to be more self-aware. So the second part of this relationship with self that I want to talk about is self-compassion. And I am not going to spend a lot of time on this because there is so much stuff out there on self-compassion and practices for self-compassion. It's ubiquitous. It's everywhere right now. Lay writers, and also scientific writers, researchers are doing a lot of work around this. One place where I would point you if you would like to learn more is actually Kristen Neff. She is a psychologist that studies this in some university in Texas. I'm not sure which one. She has a website called selfcompassion.org. It has lots of practices on there. She's done TED Talks on this. Has a lot of really great stuff on there, really accessible stuff, not all tied up with research and jargon or double-blind studies, nothing like that. So, but basically what Dr. Neff says is there are three components to compassion. The first is kindness. And kindness is more than just being nice. It's an active process. Kindness is actively seeking a way to soothe, whether it's kindness towards others or kindness towards self. There's no difference. But it's seeking out ways to make somebody feel good, whether it's a best friend or yourself. So think about how often you do that with friends. It's probably much more than what you actively do for yourself. So that's the first part of self-compassion, is an active process of soothing. The second part of compassion, self-compassion, is common humanity. I know that sounds weird, but it is the part that says we are all human, we all feel. We all pretty much feel the same sorts of feelings in different combinations. There's nobody in this world that hasn't felt all the things that you've felt. I have probably felt all the things that you've felt. Despair, sadness, joy, happiness, elation. These are common human experiences. We all feel ashamed after we've been scolded publicly. It's human. And so knowing that our experiences are shared by so many helps us understand ourselves in a different light, that we are experiencing the common themes in our life, and that it is not our fault, that this is all part of human life experience. We can do that now because we are removed from the emotional experience. But when we're the one getting yelled at work, we feel like idiots. We think, why me? I'm the only one this has ever happened to. You feel completely alone. So part of self-compassion is to remind yourself that it's okay. It's not that bad. Everybody feels this way. This is a normal emotional response to this situation. Then the third component is mindfulness. So being aware of whatever pain you're experiencing. See, mindfulness keeps coming back into this over and over again. Mindfulness is really an important practice. So we have to be aware of the suffering in order to have self-compassion and be compassionate towards ourselves. It sounds easy, right? It's not. Think about it though. When we are self-critical, that's pretty painful stuff. But we're so lost in that self-criticism that we don't allow ourselves to feel the pain of the things that we're saying. A thought experiment would be, and don't do this often, this is not a regular practice, this is not recommended, but in order to make this point, think about all the things, think of the last thing you did that you were embarrassed about. Got it, okay. Think of all the things you said to yourself about that. What an idiot. Oh my God, you're so stupid. I can't believe you did that. Like all those words, right? Think about saying those to yourself as an 8-year-old. Or if you're a parent, think about saying this to your child. If you have a favorite niece, think about saying it to them. It kind of feels, you feel it here, like it's not a good feeling. It feels wrong, right? There's something holding you back from, like, you don't even like to think of saying those things, which is good, by the way. You can experience that pain when you think of putting that on somebody external to yourself. You're aware of it in that way. When you say those things to yourself, it's just as painful. We're just so used to it. We have that constant critic in our head going, that we don't really pick up on how painful that is. The other piece is that when we do feel we've screwed up somehow, and it's easier than to feel the pain or the embarrassment of screwing up, it's easier to be the self-critic because you can point your finger at someone else. You can say, ha, you did this, that's wrong. And it gives you a sense of power and control, but it also makes you separate yourself from that experience. I can judge that instead of I'm being judged, you know? So, but it's important to move back into that role and feel the pain of that experience, because when you do that, then you can do something to fix it or change it. The other thing that it may be is that sometimes we're in self-critic, or we're not mindful when bad things happen because we go straight to problem solving. We want to fix the problem. We don't allow ourselves to feel the pain. And there are certain folks who I see do this, engineers, men. What's the point of emotion, right? They just try to skip right over that. Let's solve this problem. Well, you have to stop. A critical and necessary step is stop in acknowledging the pain that you're feeling, the sadness that you're feeling, whatever it is that you're feeling. You have to experience that. Once you've experienced that, then you can go and problem solve and solve the problem, because then that solution will make much more sense, and you're skipping a step, and it won't be fully resolved for you until you allow yourself to name the emotion and to feel it. So that's the three components of self-compassion. There are also some myths of self-compassion that I was going to go over, because a lot of times what I find in practice is that people kind of go, oh, self-compassion, roll their eyes, yeah, right, whatever, be nice to yourself, blah, 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 blah. I get a lot of pushback about self-compassion, and I'm surprised by that. But some people think that it's self-pity, that you're just feeling sorry for yourself. You shouldn't do that, because that's just ridiculous. But focusing on how you feel with compassion to yourself allows us to accept difficult feelings, A, but we can also then let go of them more fully, and it allows us to resolve things with ourselves and to let go in a way that we can't do if we don't have self-compassion. It's painful, yes, but sometimes you have to feel a little pain to fix a big pain. The second thing people say is it's a sign of weakness. I don't want to get into that gushy stuff. I have to keep my guard up. Okay, number one, having your guard up is really code for saying that you're afraid of something, because why would you need a guard if you're not afraid? And I can't think of a position that feels more weak than fear. So actually self-compassion is the opposite of that. It is a strength. It's one of the most powerful sources of resilience that we have, is self-compassion. Other people feel you're just being complacent. It's not motivating. You're giving yourself an excuse to be subpar or mediocre. It's not motivating. That's the big thing that I hear. But think about it. Human motivation. Let's say you have a kid, you want them to do something. If you harangue them and harass them and call them idiots and you keep telling them they're doing it wrong, do you think they're going to feel motivated to do that thing independently? No. If you say, you know what, you got to see, that's, not great, but let's focus on what we could do next time. What would be helpful? These things happen. Let's figure this out. You will get a much greater response from that. When you're compassionate with yourself, you actually take the limits off the top, and it lets you move further and do better, more, bigger things for yourself, more bigger, whatever. You know what I mean. The changes that we make through self-compassion, through our behaviors and our thoughts, they occur more quickly, they last longer, the effects of that last longer, and they are more reliable changes in our lives. So self-compassion is good that way. People think it's narcissistic, that it makes you self-absorbed. It's true that narcissism has been on the rise since about 1987. It's at the highest recorded levels that we have. And there's a lot of reasons for this. There were parents and teachers that told kids, in that age range, how great and special they were. They were trying to boost their self-esteem, but that's not really what self-esteem is, but that's beside the point. Self-esteem is an evaluation of self, which means you're judging yourself, right? Of your own self-worth. You're evaluating, am I worthy? Am I not worthy? We see the problem there. You're worthy because you're breathing. You're alive, so your value is implicit in being alive. Your self-esteem makes you compare yourself to other people. Yeah, there's a problem there. Self-compassion, on the other hand, is knowing how to relate with yourself with kindness and compassion. Those are two inherently different things. Okay, and the fifth thing is that people think it's selfish. I have to choose myself over others, which means if I take care of myself, then I'm neglecting others. Well, that's kind of a zero-sum, no-win situation, or I win, you lose situation, and that's not really what self-compassion is. What we find through the research and through experiences in life, the more self-compassion, the more kindness you show yourself, the more kindness you're able to show others. That it's kind of this contagious experience. If you're kind to yourself, you are more accepting and kind to others. So those are the 5 myths of self-compassion. If you want more, again, see Kristen Neff with selfcompassion.org, or go to Greater Good in Action. There is a whole center in, I think it's Berkeley, UC Berkeley, and they have practices there. 2 of the practices that I am sharing with you today are the self-compassion letter and the self-compassion break. The other thing that they have on there is a quiz on common humanity. There should be a link to that too. And again, that's one of Kristen Neff's 3 components of self-compassion. So you have that as well. I encourage you to go take those and take a look at them. The final piece of relationship to self is that I'm going to talk about today is self-acceptance. So self-awareness and self-compassion both come together to create this sense of self-acceptance, like I'm okay. With regular practice and doing these things on a regular basis over time, we develop more and more self-acceptance. And self-acceptance is a fundamental component to emotional and relational well-being. It is this, if you don't have it, that doesn't mean you're deficient or pathological in some way. This is all part of a normal human developmental process, with the goal in the end to have more self-acceptance, to be more resilient to the bumps and bruises of life, to get back up without and not let things harm you as much emotionally from an emotional perspective. So I hope these were helpful. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me. You can contact me at Sonya at beyourtruenorth.com. More than happy to answer any questions you might have or continue this conversation further.